Hey there, Sooners Nation. Coming up on today's episode of the Locked On Sooners podcast, Alex Grinch is not going to Tech. I'm going to give you my Big 12 power rankings after week 10 and what's coming up in the men's basketball season for the Oklahoma Sooners as they tip off tonight against Northwestern State. All that and more on today's episode of Locked On Sooners.
You are Locked On Sooners, your daily podcast on the Oklahoma Sooners, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey there, Sooners Nation. Welcome to the Locked On Sooners podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Thank you for joining me, and thank you for making Locked On Sooners your first listen every single day. My name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams. You can follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Sooners, and you can follow us on Facebook, Locked On Sooners Podcast. If you're listening and watching on YouTube, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button over there. And again, thank you so much for tuning in today. We're going to talk about Alex Grinch not going to Tech, who they ended up hiring. We're going to talk about my Big 12 power rankings. And then the men's basketball season tips off tonight too. We'll get you started with a little bit of a preview on that as well. But first, let's talk about this. Texas Tech hires Joe McGuire, the associate head coach at Baylor. He's the outside linebackers coach as well. This is a big hire for them. He's a guy that's well respected in the Texas high school coaching community and happens to be an alumnus of my alma mater as well, University of Texas at Arlington. And I only point that out because UTA hasn't had a football team since the late 80s. And this is a guy that is about to make a jump into the head coaching reins at a Power 5 school. And sometimes, people like myself, podcasters, bloggers, writers, get a little bit criticized because maybe we didn't play college football or professional football, but you can know the game without having had played the game. Lincoln Riley is evident of that. He didn't play in college, but he knows it about as well as anybody in college football. So the only reason we bring this up is Alex Grinch is not going to Texas Tech. We had a show last week where we talked about Alex Grinch was going to interview for the Texas Tech Red Raiders job. We don't know the depths of the interest for both sides. We don't know how interested Alex Grinch was in the Texas Tech job or vice versa. But it looks like, they decided to go with, McGuire out of Baylor. And it's a hire that makes a lot of sense for them because, a guy that is from Texas, has a lot of Texas ties, big in the high school community as well, somebody who's very, very well respected. It's going to help them a lot on the recruiting front. Now, they're not going to necessarily be able to overtake anybody like Texas or Oklahoma or Alabama in Texas recruiting, but what it's going to do is it's going to help kind of push them up, maybe where they are able to out-recruit Baylor or out-recruit Texas Tech or Houston, out-recruit TCU, they are Texas Tech, or Houston. It's going to help them just recruit in Texas in general. And if you listen to him talk, he sounds like the perfect West Texas kind of a coach. As a guy that was very, very successful in high school. He had three state championships at Cedar Hill. So to me, it's a really, really good hire for them. I think it's somebody who's not necessarily going to be looking to, make a big jump. He was at Cedar Hill for 11 years before he moved on to Baylor. And so I feel like it shows you somebody who's going to have a lot of longevity, potentially be at your program for a long time. And if you're Tech, that's kind of what you want. You don't want a guy that is, you want a guy that is kind of rising the ranks in the coaching circles. At the same time, you want somebody who's going to be kind of your Gary Patterson, right? You want somebody who's going to be there for a really long time and help develop a program, build a program, and isn't just going to be there for a few years and then take the next big job that opens up after that. Because if you look at Texas Tech, you're not a destination. You know what I mean? For a lot of college coaches, you would be kind of a pass through. And that's why they went with a Cliff Kingsbury back in the day, because he was a guy that's from Texas Tech. He, had a big career for them. And if it was going to work out, there's a good chance he would have stayed at Texas Tech for a long period of time. It didn't work out, went off to the NFL. It's working out a little bit better for him there. But then, or you're going to have to work, get retread hires like Tommy Tuberville that didn't work out either. Or you're going to have to go to, the group of five and get a guy. But even that guy could potentially just kind of be a stop through for you as he, tries to climb the coaching ranks. But so I think this is a really good hire. What it means for Alex Grinch and for Oklahoma is, I think it puts off obviously his, head coaching potential destination down the road. I don't know if it was one of those situations where they wanted to make a hire and make it happen now and bring him into the program and get started now, or if they were willing to wait until the end of the season. If they weren't willing to wait until the end of the season for someone to come on board, then maybe Alex Grinch is like, nah, that's not the job for me, because obviously he's got an important job to do with Oklahoma as the defensive coordinator. He's not going to just up and leave these guys in the midst of a 9-0 season with a chance to make the college football playoff and potentially win a national championship. Like that would not be Alex Grinch. But if you're Joe McGuire, you're kind of just an assistant coach or a position coach. And, um, if Dave Aranda and the Bears, obviously I'm sure they gave, him their blessing, so to speak, to go ahead and interview for this job and then take this job when it became available. If you're Joe McGuire, like that's not necessarily outside the realm of possibility for you, because you're simply a position coach. You can restructure your coaching staff with an assistant. You can bump them up to take that spot. And he wasn't necessarily a Dave Aranda guy. He had started on Baylor's staff under Matt Rule. And so I think it kind of timing wise, it really wasn't going to make sense for Alex Grinch unless Texas Tech was willing to like put off their decision until after the season was over, or at least until, the bowl season, if that makes sense. And so I don't think this necessarily means that Alex Grinch is going to be with Oklahoma for the long haul. I still think he's going to be a name that pops up in coaching searches in bowl season or in the spring after, in January, because I think that he has done a really, really good job with Oklahoma's defense. Even if it's not been great, it's been a little bit up and down this season. I think some of that's more attributable to injury than it is to game planning or, coaching necessarily. I think he's done a pretty good job coaching. I feel like he's saying the right things in press conferences, kind of trying to challenge his team to show up to practice a little bit better and practice a little bit more. I feel like a lot of times, the effort and the development of players often falls too heavily on the coaching side of things. Whereas sometimes if you're expecting development from a player, like there's two sides of that coin. The player has to be willing to put in the effort as well. And that goes to also performance. Like coaches often get blamed so much for player performance when sometimes it's just the player. Like the player isn't prepared to play, whether it's mentally or physically. And a coach can only go and do so much to get a player ready. The player is going to have some desire himself to get ready to play as well. And so as much as, things have been up and down for this team this season on defense, I think some of it is injuries. Some of it is, playing guys before they were ready to play. Billy Bowman's had some good moments for this team, but I think he's still a bit of a ways off to being a full-time contributor. I think next year we'll see him play a lot better after he gets, a full season under his belt. But Alex Grinch, I think there's still a good chance that he ends up, taking a head coaching job this offseason if the right job comes available. I don't necessarily think he's going to jump at just any job. And so I don't know if the Oklahoma situation is kind of out of the woods yet. I think they're still going to have to either maybe pay him a little bit more to stay or, do what they can to keep him. But it wouldn't surprise me if he did take a head coaching job, this offseason. So still a lot to figure out on that front. Still going to work that out. But I think it's inevitable at some point that he does take a head coaching job because he's a young guy. He's not going to necessarily settle into a defensive coordinator position and just be there forever. I think he's somebody who's still motivated and still wanting to kind of climb those coaching ranks. And I think he's a good coach. It seems like he's done a really good job on the recruiting front. Him and Lincoln Riley have made a really good tandem. They've done a good job at bringing defensive players in. And so I like that, he's still here. I just don't know for how long he's going to be here. But coming up next, let's go through my Big 12 power rankings. We'll talk about the movement that happened. I mean, we talked about it on the show yesterday, just the how the Big 12 play impacted Oklahoma, how the nation's play impacted Oklahoma as far as the college football playoff rankings go. But before we do that, I want to talk to you about Prize Picks. Prize Picks is daily fantasy made easy. If you've not heard about Prize Picks, you've got to check it out at prizepicks.com. It's a leader in college sports daily fantasy. They offer more props than anyone in the world and offers all the star players of the Power Five as well as mid-major players as well. So if you want to hop on some Grayson McCall over at Coastal Carolina or Malik Willis at Liberty, you can do that. You can play some props on them. They offer props on yardage, touchdowns, even interceptions thrown. I like to play the props. It's a lot of fun to be able to go there and, put some money down on props like yardage totals and touchdowns thrown and even interceptions thrown. If you're seeing them playing a stout defense like maybe Oklahoma State, and you want to go against the quarterback, then hey, you can pick up props on the interception thrown. So you can go to prizepicks.com. You can put down up to $100 using our promo code. You'll get 100% deposit match. So if you put in $100, PrizePicks will give you $100 using our promo code Locked On. Use the award-winning app on both the App Store and Google Play. You can make entries in 60 seconds or less, and they offer safe and fast withdrawals. So don't hesitate. Check out prizepicks.com. Use the promo code Locked On, or go to your app store and download the app today. PrizePicks is daily fantasy made easy. And this episode of Locked On Sooners is brought to you by McDonald's, proudly serving communities since 1965. McDonald's is always a place for my family to go on a road trip or after a soccer practice. We always enjoy McDonald's. My daughter loves the Happy Meal. She's a big cheeseburger fan. She loves it. Onions and cheese only. No ketchup, no mustard, no pickles for her. My wife and I, we always get the quarter pounder with cheese. It just always hits the spot. And those French fries can never be beat. They're number one in the power rankings of French fries. McDonald's is where it's at. So if you're looking for fast, affordable, and tasty food, go to McDonald's today. Hit the drive-thru, get the sausage burrito. If you're still waiting for breakfast, get you a McFlurry. The McFlurry always hits home as well. I mean, sometimes you just want something cool and refreshing, and that McFlurry is fantastic. So go to McDonald's. It's the best place to get great, affordable food that always tastes great and it's always consistent. I might actually go get some McDonald's after I'm done recording this. So McDonald's is what I'm doing today. Ba-da-ba-ba-ba. I'm loving it. Hey, again, thank you so much for listening to Locked On Sooners, making it your first listen every single day. So happy that you're here joining the show. If you're on YouTube, make sure you hit the like and subscribe button. Let me know in the comments what you think about the show, what you think about my power rankings that I'm about to put out there. If you've got questions that you'd like to see answered on the show, make sure you throw them there in the comments section. Also, you can hit me up on Twitter at Locked On Sooners, or at my personal Twitter account at John9Williams, or at Facebook Locked On Sooners. We're also got a Gmail account, lockedonsooners@gmail.com. So a bevy of ways to reach out and touch base with me here on the show. Would love to hear your feedback and see what you think of the show. Also, just interact and dialogue about Oklahoma Sooners football, basketball, and softball season is right around the corner as well. So it's going to be a great year for Oklahoma Sooners athletics, and we'll cover them all here on Locked On Sooners. But let's go through the Big 12 power rankings. Coming up first, at number 10, the Kansas Jayhawks. I mean, what more can you say about Kansas? They lost 35-10 to Kansas State. I bet they're excited about basketball season. It's like somebody, 30, 40 years ago made a deal with the devil that said, hey, if our basketball team can be one of the premier programs in college basketball, we'll willingly sacrifice our football team. Because Kansas just, it's getting better under Lance Leipold, but it just hasn't turned a corner yet. And it might. Maybe next year it will turn the corner. Maybe when Oklahoma and Texas leave for the SEC, it might open things up for Kansas to kind of rise in the ranks a little bit. I think it's going to get a little bit tougher, because the middle, like that second tier teams, like the Baylor, Iowa State, even Texas Tech, Oklahoma State, all those guys it's going to get deeper with Cincinnati, Houston, and Boise. BYU coming into the fold, not Boise. Boise's not coming into the fold. BYU coming into the fold. I think it's going to make it a little bit more difficult for those teams at the bottom to kind of rise the ranks, because the middle class is going to get much, much deeper. And then you got Texas Tech. Bye week for them. But I think they won the bye week. If you can win a bye week, I think they did it by hiring Joe McGuire. I think it's, again, a fantastic hire for them. We talked about it a lot in the first segment. Don't need to repeat that. But can they finish the season on a strong note? I think we'll see. I think for them, finishing the season on a strong note would be getting Donovan Smith involved in the offense, getting him more and more playing time, and trying to get him ready and prepared to maybe take over the team next season. Coming in at number 8, you got West Virginia. West Virginia had been playing pretty good football, but they definitely laid an egg against Oklahoma State. Oklahoma State obviously is the best defense in the Big 12, and they sacked Jarrett Doege 8 times. They held him to the Mountaineers to half a yard rushing if you include that sack yardage, but the running backs 2.3 yards per carry. It was just one of those days that that West Virginia just didn't have an answer for Oklahoma State's defense. And yeah, it's been a down year for West Virginia. I think they had higher expectations, especially, when they played Oklahoma pretty close in the Big 12 opener, a 16-13 win for the Sooners. I think they probably had higher expectations for what their season might be. They started to kind of turn some things around last few weeks, but it definitely hit a sour note here this past weekend. And then coming at number 7, TCU, off the incredible performance by Chandler Morris, who has 500 yards of total offense combined, more than 450 yards passing, 3 touchdowns. Dude was just phenomenal. Lincoln Riley said it. He just had a great game, and he loved to watch him do it. Big win over the Baylor Bears, who were at the time ranked number 13 in the country. Now they've dropped back to number 18. It'll be interesting to see where Baylor falls to in the college football playoff rankings, but huge win by the TCU Horned Frogs, who are starting a new era of football with Gary Patterson kind of shown the door by TCU. It'll be interesting to see where they go with their coaching hire as well. And then coming at number 6, the Texas Longhorns, man, they got the brakes beat off by Iowa State. It was a close game at halftime. Texas had a lead again, 7-3 at halftime. And then Iowa State comes out, puts out a 21-point third quarter, and just runs away with it. Literally, Breece Hall has another fantastic game because he's one of the best running backs in the country. What more can you say about Texas? I mean, they're struggling right now, and there's a lot of things going on in Austin that aren't looking good. I mean, rumors that there's going to be a lot of kids transferring out of there. We'll see what happens on that front, but Texas definitely not peaking with the potential that Oklahoma and Texas could go to the SEC. It's not really been a great season for them off the back of that news. So, it's still early in the Steve Sarkisian area. I'm not ready to bury him yet, even though I don't necessarily think he's a great coach. I think he's due some more time, but it's only going to get more difficult for them when they go to the SEC. It's just a little bit deeper, especially at the top of the conference. There's a lot more impressive teams at the top of the conference. So coming at number 5, Kansas State, who really turned their season around. I mean, they started off strong, then they went through a really rough spell, but now are 6-3 on the season, bowl eligible, 3-3 in the Big 12, have a chance to finish the season strong as well. Knocked off their cross-state rival, if you want to call them that, the Kansas Jayhawks. I think it was a solid game for them, solid performance. And I think it's a good, strong season for Chris Kleiman. Skylar Thompson going to end his career on a high note, probably for Kansas State in this last year for him. But they were a team that was supposed to be a little bit more formidable this year, and so to be 3-3 in the Big 12 is probably a bit of a disappointment for them. But they had a tough stretch of it. Skylar Thompson was out. I think if he's in and not injured, maybe the season goes a little bit differently for them. But that's kind of where they're at this point. And then at number 4, you got the Baylor Bears coming off of a very disappointing loss to TCU, a game where the Dave Aranda defense just really got outplayed by Chandler Morris and the Horned Frogs. I mean, Quentin Johnston, he's a beast, man, and he's going to be tough for everybody in the Big 12 for however long he's in the Big 12 before he goes to the NFL. He's going to be a really, really difficult matchup, and he was for Baylor. And now we'll see if Baylor is able to bounce back this next week when they host Oklahoma. That's going to be a great game. I think Baylor is still a tough team, even though they lost to TCU. But I think that TCU definitely provided a blueprint for how to attack Dave Aranda's defense, and it might be through the air. And we saw against Texas Tech that Lincoln Riley was more than willing to put the ball in Caleb Williams' hands and let him sling the ball around and win them that football game. And then coming at number 3, Iowa State, another team that has really turned it around. They've been playing really, really good football. And aside from that West Virginia loss, a 38-30 loss, they've been really, really good and had been in contention for the Big 12 despite some early season struggles. They got a big win against Texas, a nice bounce back win where, they just dominated the Longhorns defensively. And I think that was the defense that most expected would play against West Virginia, but it just didn't really show up. And so I think there's still a team that's right in it, kind of right in the thick of things in the Big 12 and could potentially find themselves back in the Big 12 title hunt. They've got to have some help. whether it's Oklahoma beating Baylor and Oklahoma State, and then if the Cyclones are able to knock off Oklahoma, there's a good chance that with tiebreakers and all that they could find themselves in the Big 12 championship. It's still they need some help to get there, but there's still a chance. And that game in 2 weeks is going to be a huge matchup. Oklahoma hosting the Cyclones. I don't think by any stretch of the imagination that's an easy game for the Sooners. Iowa State does some things offensively and defensively. They're going to be difficult for Oklahoma. But if they're healthy, I like Oklahoma's chances, obviously. And then at number 2, best defense in the Big 12. If Spencer Sanders is able to control the football, not turn it over, I think the Oklahoma State Cowboys can play with anybody in the Big 12, including Oklahoma. The question is, can he not turn the ball over? Because, again, he had an interception against West Virginia. It didn't really matter, though, because West Virginia's offense just wasn't able to do anything against Oklahoma State's defense. That won't necessarily be the case when they face the Oklahoma Sooners in 3 weeks in Bedlam. Oklahoma's offense will be challenged. They're probably not going to score 50 like they've been doing, but when you have a guy like Caleb Williams, he's got so many great intangibles that you might be able to slow him down for a quarter. You might be able to stop him for a drive, but you're not going to be able to stop him the whole game. And so Spencer Sanders is going to have to make some plays in this game. The Oklahoma Sooners defense is going to slow their running game down and put the ball in Spencer Sanders' hands. They're going to have to make plays for Oklahoma State to win. It's not just going to be enough for the defense to slow down Oklahoma, because are they going to be able to keep them under 20 points? That's going to be a huge question. And we'll talk about it when we get to Bedlam week, and we'll talk about it with Linda Godfrey of Locked On Pokes. I think that's going to be a really fun episode. And then coming in at number 1, no surprise, the Oklahoma Sooners in a bye week. I think this was a great time for them to get the bye week. I mean, yes, it kind of sucked that they had to go 9 weeks before they got one, but now they're 9-0. They've got everything right in front of them. They've got the Big 12 championship right there for them if they're able to win out. They've got a potential berth in the college football playoff right there for them if they're able to win out. And so great time to get rested, get refreshed, get healed a little bit, get some guys healthy. Still waiting on Woody Washington and Theo Weiss, who Lincoln Riley said it would be a bit of a stretch if they were going to, for them to be able to play this week. And that's okay. I think like you've seen with your wide receiver crew that if at least 3 of your top 4 guys are healthy, that being your top 4 guys being Marvin Mims, Jaden Hazelwood, Mario Williams, Mike Woods, if 3 of those 4 guys are healthy, you're going to be in pretty good shape offensively, because you still have Drake Stoops, you still have Trayvon West. So you have a deep wide receiver core, and you're going to be able to make plays. If those guys are healthy, it helps. I think they're going to be able to get Michael Woods back this week, and if they do, that'll help a lot. So Theo Weiss, though, the idea is that he should be ready at some point for the stretch run, whether that's Iowa State, Oklahoma State, or the Big 12 championship. That remains to be seen. It'll be nice to see him back, because he does provide something for you in the passing game. He's a nice possession receiver for you, kind of like in the Jaden Hazelwood vein. He's able to make some things happen in the short part of the field. And then Woody Washington, I think you can afford to wait on him a little bit longer if he's not fully healthy. If he's not fully healthy, then don't rush him back. Key Lawrence showed you that he can play some outside corner for you. I think this bye week was probably a perfect time for him. Was able to put some good things on tape against Texas Tech, go into the week, watch the film, see what he did well, see what he didn't do well, try and work on some of the technique things, improve upon those, and then have more time to get ready for Baylor to be the outside corner. And so I fully anticipate Key Lawrence continuing to play outside corner for the Sooners as they go into this week against Baylor. So good news is the bye week came and went. No major issues, no reports of anybody getting in trouble, no reports of anybody getting further injured. And so it's going to be a great week, man. This game against Baylor is going to be fantastic. It's going to be huge, and I'm looking forward to it. And we'll continue to talk more about it as the week presses on. But coming up next, let's get you ready for men's basketball season. We've got the season opener coming tonight for the Oklahoma Sooners versus the Northwestern State Demons out of Louisiana at 7 p.m. at Lloyd Noble Center. We'll talk about that after I talk to you about about Built Bar here on the Locked On Podcast Network. If you haven't tried Built Bar by now, you're missing out. I've been talking about Built Bar for more than a year now. It's fantastic. It tastes great. I love it. I think you will too. They have so many great flavors like peanut butter brownie, mint brownie, coconut almond, salted caramel, double chocolate, and cherry barcia. Every one of their bars is 100% covered in chocolate, and it tastes great. Great calories, great protein, but none of the sugar, none of the fat that you would expect in some of the other kind of trendier protein bars. Only 4 or 5 grams of sugar, but you get 18 grams of protein out of a lot of these bars. So they're fantastic for you. And you can get a 15% discount over at built.com using our promo code locked15. It's the built bar the protein bar that I eat pretty much every single day. Been eating it now for more than a year, and I love it. It gives me all the energy I need for my work day, for running errands. Even before church the other day, I went to church and I needed a protein. I needed a snack before going to church. Had my built bar. It was perfect. Got me to lunchtime and didn't have any of the empty calories that I might get by having a bowl of cereal or something like that. So make sure you go to built.com, use promo code locked15, get 15% off your next order at built.com. I also got to talk to you about Bet Online. Bet Online is the fastest and easiest way to bet on all your favorite sports. And they've got a new web interface for the start of basketball season with more props, odds, and lines than ever before. It remains the number one spot for all the basketball and football action this season. So head to their new updated desktop or mobile device or mobile website to sign up today and receive your 50% welcome bonus on your first deposit using our promo code locked on. From basketball, football, NHL, boxing, and UFC right to your favorite Vegas casino games, don't wait to take advantage of all the amazing offers available for the 2021 season. That's Bet Online, where the game starts. And again, thanks so much for listening to Locked On Sooners and making it your first listen every single day. Also, go check out the Locked On Big 12 podcast. Make that one your second listen every single day with our guy, Josh Neighbors. Get all the Big 12 insight and news happening around the Big 12. A lot of things happening right now. So it's a great show. Josh does a great job. Make sure you check that out. Also, check out Locked On Thunder if you're an OKC Thunder fan, or Locked On Mavericks if you're a Dallas Mavericks fan like I am, or go check out the Locked On Dallas Cowboys show, Locked On Cowboys, with our guys Marcus Mosher and Landon McCool. Those are two of my guys. Love those guys. They do a fantastic job covering the Dallas Cowboys. A lot of fun. But let's talk about men's basketball. Men's basketball getting kicked off tonight against Northwestern State at 7 p.m. at Lloyd Noble Center. And it's a new era for men's basketball. Porter Moser takes over for Lon Kruger. Lon Kruger, who was the coach for the Oklahoma Sooners for 10 seasons, took the Sooners to 7 NCAA tournament berths, and had a Final Four appearance in the 2015-16 season with Buddy Hield leading the way. And just a fantastic legacy that he is handing over to Porter Moser, who I think can help build on that. And it looks like a totally different team this year too. If you look at the roster, definitely a lot of guys returning, like Elijah Harkless, who is one of the kind of the guys that's the heart and soul, the backbone of this team. Emoji Gibson, who his streaky play and hot shooting can help Oklahoma win a game. But they're bringing in Tanner and Jacob Groves from Eastern Washington, Jordan Goldwire from Duke, Marvin Johnson from Eastern Illinois, and then Ethan Chargeois from SMU. This is a team that, while they do lose Austin Reeves to the NBA and Brady Manick to the transfer portal, this is a team that has a lot of experience to start the season for the Oklahoma Sooners. And even though there's been a lot of turnover at head coach, on the coaching staff, with some of your key players, I think this is still a team that can make a run and make a lot of noise in the Big 12, even if they're not necessarily being highly thought of right now. You look at ESPN, you look at CBS, and ESPN basically unanimously predicted them to finish 7th in the Big 12. So 7 out of 10 teams. And then CBS had them as high as 6th and as low as 8th in their preseason rankings. I think that's a little low, but again, some of it is probably the unknown of what Porter Moser is going to be able to do with this newly assembled cast of characters that they have. I mean, probably 5 of your top 7 or 8 players are going to be new guys that are all trying to figure out how to play together. Now, if their exhibition game from last week was any indication, this is going to be a team that's going to shoot the ball, and they're going to shoot it well. You know, they had a lot of guys that were hitting threes and making like hitting 100% of their 3-pointers. And we know, like Emoji Gibson, he's a great shooter. You know, Jacob and Tanner Groves, that's a lot of what they bring from Eastern Washington. And so if this team is able to shoot like they did last week, and obviously they'll have some games where they struggle, but I think if they shoot 35 to 40% from 3, 40 to 50% from the field, I think they're going to be a team that's going to be formidable in the Big 12. They're going to have a lot of options off the bench as well as their starting 5. And so I like this Oklahoma Sooners team. It's going to be a lot of fun to see what Porter Moser's team looks like. when they hit the floor. But I think that they're going to have a chance to make some noise. And I think, we saw it last year, like even in for a stretch run at times where they were undermanned due to COVID precautions or players contracting COVID. I mean, they pulled off some really good upsets led by Austin Reeves. And even in games when Austin Reeves was out and they had Davion Harmon, Brady Manick, or Emoji Gibson leading the way, this was a team that was making some noise. They were making plays and winning games that they probably shouldn't have won. And I think that's going to be the same this year too. I mean, they're going to win more games than people expect, and they're probably going to win games that people don't expect them to win. But I think a lot of it is because they are a deep team and they have more talent than people realize. And I mean, that Eastern Washington team last year made some noise, and nobody expected that in the tournament last year because Tanner Groves and Jacob Groves were really good for them. I think the transfers that they brought in bring some really strong experience to the floor and are going to be able to help the Sooners mesh well. And if they're able to mesh well and build chemistry and figure out how to play together, which I don't have any reason to believe that they won't, then this is going to be a team that's going to make a run. Now, you look at Joe Lunardi, his bracketology, preseason bracketology, he has Oklahoma as one of the first 4 out in the NCAA tournament. And I just don't see that. I just don't think that they're going to be on the outside looking in of the NCAA tournament by the time we get there. Now, the Big 12 might send 6 teams to the NCAA tournament, but I think Oklahoma is going to be one of them. This is a team that I think potentially they're deeper than they were last year. You get a guy like Jordan Goldwire who played at Duke and played significant minutes for Duke. And I think that's going to matter for Oklahoma in the Big 12. These guys are coming in with a lot of experience. It's not like you're relying on a lot of freshmen and sophomore who haven't played many minutes. I mean, these guys have played a lot of big minutes, a lot of important minutes in big games. And so I think they're being underrated a little bit right now. Now, we got to see it on the floor like we do with the Oklahoma football team. We got to see them play it out on the floor. But I don't have any reason to believe that this Oklahoma Sooners basketball team isn't going to be able to make some noise in the Big 12. I like this team. I like what they're made up of. They look like they want to move the ball around, which I think is going to be huge for them. Some of the issue with their team last year was that the ball kind of got stopped down and they tried to play a lot of isolation ball. Not just Austin Reeves. This was a lot of guys, but Porter Mosier looks like he's bringing a brand of basketball that is going to move the ball around and try and find open shooters. And that's, if you can shoot the ball well, you're going to win a lot of games in college basketball because teams that, especially if teams that shoot the 3, they win a lot. And I think this is going to be a team that shoots the 3 really, really well. And it's going to be exciting to watch. Can't wait to tune into this game tonight and see what they have. It's going to be a lot of fun to follow this basketball team as the Porter Mosier era begins in Norman. So that's going to do it for today's episode of Locked On Sooners. Make sure you are subscribed to the show wherever you get your podcasts. We're free and available on all platforms and now available on YouTube. So make sure you go check the show out over there, like and subscribe to the videos as you watch them. Drop a comment, drop a question. If you disagree with me, I'd love to hear about it and talk to you in the comment section. I love some good dialogue. It's always great to talk sports with anybody. That's one of the things I've always loved about sports growing up. My dad and I, we would just have these conversations about NFL or Major League Baseball or basketball or whatever it was, just whatever the trending topic was, we'd be riding in the car talking sports. So it's a lot of fun. Shout out to you, Dad. Love you. Thanks for always talking sports with me. And you're part of the reason why I'm here. So it's a lot of fun. Again, make sure you get ready for tomorrow's episode where we'll have our Big 12 roundtable. It's a lot of fun every single week to chat up with those guys. Josh Neighbors from Locked On Big 12, Linda Godfrey from Locked On Pokes, and Steven Simcox from Locked On Horned Frogs, with guest appearances by Jacob Hatch from Locked On Cougars of BYU. So always a great show to watch. So make sure you check that out as well. But until tomorrow, my name is John Williams. You can follow me on Twitter at John9Williams, and you can read my work at the Sooners Wire at usatoday.com. And follow the show on Twitter at Locked On Sooners and on Facebook, Locked On Sooners Podcast. Again, until tomorrow, make sure you're booming and Sooner, and Boomer Sooner.